The morning sun cast long shadows across San Francisco's financial district as Marcus Chen stepped out of his Tesla Model S. At 42, he carried himself with the confident air of someone who had conquered Silicon Valley, though few passing by would guess he was worth billions. His simple black turtleneck and jeans could have belonged to any tech worker in the city. Marcus checked his Apple Watch, 11:30 a.m., right on schedule for his daily lunch routine. He had built his empire on routine and precision, after all. Every morning, he woke at 5 a.m., worked out for exactly 1 hour, and arrived at his office by 7:30 a.m. Lunch was always at 11:30 a.m., no exceptions. Even his board members knew not to schedule meetings during this sacred time slot. As he walked down Montgomery Street, his phone buzzed constantly with notifications. 3 new emails from investors, a message from his sister about their mother's upcoming birthday, and 15 Slack notifications from his development team. Marcus responded to each one without breaking his stride, his fingers dancing across the screen with practiced efficiency. The streets were busy with the usual lunch crowd, young professionals and business casual, tourists with their cameras, and the occasional group of startup founders trying to look important in their hoodies and expensive sneakers. Marcus barely noticed them anymore. After 15 years in San Francisco, the city's characters had become mere background noise to his focused mind. A homeless man sat huddled in a doorway, holding a cardboard sign. Marcus usually walked past such sights without a second glance, but today, something made him pause for a split second. The man's eyes. They reminded him of someone. His father, perhaps. The memory of their one-room apartment in Chicago's Chinatown flashed through his mind, but he pushed it away quickly. That was a different life, one he had worked hard to leave behind. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his assistant, reminding him about the 2 p.m. meeting with potential investors from Japan. Marcus made a mental note to keep lunch short today. The deal could add another billion to his company's valuation, and he needed to be perfectly prepared. As he approached his favorite deli, the Golden Crumb, the familiar scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the air. The owner, Mr. Patterson, had opened this place 20 years ago, and it had become something of an institution among the local business crowd. Marcus had been coming here for the past 5 years, always ordering the same thing: a turkey club sandwich with no mayo, extra mustard, and a side salad. Through the large windows, Marcus could see the usual lunchtime rush forming inside. A line of people in business attire stretched from the counter to the door, all of them probably trying to grab a quick bite before heading back to their offices. He noticed a few faces he recognized, other CEOs, venture capitalists, and tech entrepreneurs who, like him, had made this their regular lunch spot. Just before reaching the deli's door, Marcus paused to check an urgent email from his chief technology officer. They had encountered a minor issue with their new AI algorithm, something that could potentially delay their upcoming product launch. He fired off a quick response, suggesting a solution he had used in a similar situation years ago. The cool air conditioning hit his face as he pushed open the heavy glass door. The smell of fresh bread was stronger now, mixed with the aroma of roasting coffee and various sandwich fillings. Mr. Patterson noticed him from behind the counter and gave his usual friendly nod. Even with the lunch rush, the owner never failed to acknowledge his regular customers. Marcus took his place in line, still responding to emails on his phone. His mind was already racing ahead to the afternoon meetings, the evening conference call with European investors, and the 1,000 other tasks that filled his daily schedule. Just another routine lunch break in the life of a tech billionaire. Little did Marcus know that in the next few minutes, his carefully structured world would be turned upside down. His routine was about to be shattered by an unexpected encounter that would force him to confront the past he had worked so hard to forget. But for now, he stood in line, perfectly content in his bubble of success and schedule, unaware that fate had other plans for him that day. The deli's bell chimed as another customer entered, and Marcus moved forward in line, one step closer to the moment that would change everything. Marcus was just 3 people away from the counter when he finally secured his regular order through the Golden Crumbs mobile app. He preferred using the app. It was faster, more efficient, and meant less time spent talking. Mr. Patterson was already preparing his usual turkey club sandwich, a routine so familiar they could practically do it with their eyes closed. The deli buzzed with the typical lunch rush energy. The clink of plates, the hiss of the coffee machine, and the constant murmur of business conversations filled the air. Marcus had just pulled out his phone to check his stock portfolio when a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. "Don't eat that. Please, don't eat that sandwich." The voice was young, desperate, and loud enough to make several customers jump. Marcus turned around, along with everyone else in the deli, to see a small boy bursting through the door. He couldn't have been more than 12 years old, but what struck Marcus most was his appearance. The boy's clothes were several sizes too big, a dirty gray sweatshirt with tears at the elbows, jeans held up by what looked like a piece of rope, and sneakers so worn the soles were barely hanging on. His dark hair was matted and unwashed, his face smudged with dirt, but his eyes were alive with an urgent intensity that made Marcus take a step back. The boy ran straight toward Marcus, ignoring the shocked stares from other customers. His breathing was heavy, like he'd been running for blocks. "Please, sir," he gasped, pointing at the sandwich Mr. Patterson was preparing. "You can't eat that. I've seen what they do. I've seen everything." Security guards from the building next door had noticed the commotion and were already making their way into the deli. Mr. Patterson's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Get that street rat out of here," he shouted, pointing at the boy. "He's been causing trouble all week." But the boy stood his ground, even as the guards approached. He looked directly at Marcus, and in that moment, something in his expression made the billionaire raise his hand to stop the guards. There was no hint of deception in those eyes, only fear and determination. "They think nobody sees them," the boy continued, his voice shaking but clear. "They think because I'm just a homeless kid, I don't matter. But I've been watching from the alley. Every night, after they close, they bring in the bad meat, the expired stuff from other places. I've seen them change the dates on the packages." The deli fell silent. Even the kitchen staff stopped what they were doing. Mr. Patterson's face had gone from red to white in seconds. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "You can't believe the ravings of some street urchin. Someone get him out of here." But Marcus wasn't looking at Mr. Patterson anymore. His attention was fixed on the boy, who, despite his ragged appearance, stood tall and unflinching. Something about the child's courage stirred a long-buried memory in Marcus of another young boy who had once been ignored and dismissed because of his circumstances. "What's your name?" Marcus asked quietly, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "Tommy," the boy replied, his shoulders relaxing slightly at not being immediately thrown out. "Tommy Rivera, and I'm telling the truth, sir. I wouldn't lie about this. People could get sick." Marcus noticed how Tommy's hands were trembling, not from fear, but from what looked like hunger. Despite his obvious need, here he was, trying to protect complete strangers from potential harm. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus, a homeless child showing more concern for others' welfare than a successful business owner. Just then, Marcus's phone buzzed with a reminder about his 2 p.m. meeting with the Japanese investors. The billion-dollar deal that had seemed so important just minutes ago now felt strangely insignificant compared to the scene unfolding before him. "Sir," one of the security guards said, reaching for Tommy's shoulder, "would you like us to remove him?" Marcus looked at the sandwich on the counter, then back at Tommy's earnest face, and made a decision that would set in motion a chain of events he could never have anticipated. "No," he said firmly, stepping between Tommy and the guards. "I think we all need to hear what this young man has to say." The lunch crowd watched in stunned silence as Marcus Chen, the billionaire tech mogul known for his rigid routines and detached demeanor, pulled out a chair and gestured for Tommy to sit down. The deli's usual lunchtime buzz had transformed into tense silence as Tommy sat across from Marcus at a corner table. The security guards remained by the door, and Mr. Patterson nervously paced behind his counter, occasionally shooting worried glances in their direction. Other customers whispered among themselves, their phones raised to capture this unusual scene. Tommy's hands wrapped around the hot chocolate Marcus had ordered for him, the first warm drink he'd had in days. His initial burst of courage was still there, but now mixed with visible exhaustion. Marcus noticed how the boy's eyes darted to the exit occasionally, like someone used to needing quick escapes. "Start from the beginning," Marcus said gently, pushing a plate of fresh cookies toward Tommy. "Tell me everything you've seen." Tommy took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the warm cup. "It started 3 months ago when Mom got really sick. We couldn't pay the hospital bills, and then we lost our apartment. She's still in the hospital, and he paused, linking back tears. I couldn't stay in the shelter because I'm too old for the women's section, and the men's section isn't safe for kids. Marcus felt something twist in his chest as Tommy continued. I found a spot in the alley behind this daily. It's dry when it rains, and the kitchen vent keeps it warm at night. That's how I started seeing things. Tommy's voice grew stronger as he described what he'd witnessed. Every Tuesday and Friday, around midnight, this white van shows up. They bring in boxes of meat and other stuff that other restaurants threw out. I saw them changing labels once when they left the back door open. They take the old dates off and put new ones on. Marcus pulled out his phone and started taking notes. What else? The bread they call freshly baked? Most of it is frozen stuff they just heat up. And last week, I saw them picking up dropped food from the floor and putting it back in the display case. Tommy's voice dropped to a whisper. There's more. Sometimes, late at night, other people come. They talk about money and use words I don't understand, but they're always counting cash. Lots of it. As Tommy spoke, Marcus noticed Mr. Patterson slip into his office, closing the door quickly behind him. Through the office window, you could see the man making frantic phone calls. I tried telling people, Tommy continued, his shoulders slumping. The health inspector came once, but Mr. Patterson must have known somehow. Everything was clean that day. Nobody believes a kid like me. Why did you decide to warn me specifically? Marcus asked, curious about what had prompted today's outburst. Tommy looked down at his hot chocolate. I'd seen you come here every day. You always look busy and important, but, he hesitated, you also look kind. Like my dad used to. And yesterday, I saw them preparing the special sandwich meat for today. It smelled raw, really raw. I couldn't let anyone eat it. Marcus processed this information, his mind already formulating a plan. But first, he needed to address something more immediate. Tommy, when was the last time you ate a proper meal? The boy's silence was answer enough. What about your mother? Which hospital is she in? San Francisco General, Tommy replied quietly. I try to visit her when I can sneak in. The nurses are nice, but they keep asking where I'm staying. I can't tell them the truth or they'll call social services. Marcus watched as Tommy fought back tears again. Here was a child who had been living in an alley, surviving on his own, yet his primary concern had been protecting strangers from bad food. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him, a homeless boy showing more integrity than a successful businessman. Just then, Marcus's phone buzzed again. The Japanese investors were asking to move the meeting earlier. Without hesitation, he texted back to reschedule for tomorrow. Some things were more important than business deals. Tommy, Marcus said, making a decision that would change both their lives. I believe you, and we're going to do something about this. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe and clean. Will you trust me to help you? Tommy studied Marcus's face for a long moment, perhaps searching for any sign of deception. Finally, he nodded slowly. As they stood to leave, Marcus noticed Mr. Patterson watching them through his office window, his face pale with fear. The billionaire allowed himself a small, grim smile. The deli owner had no idea what was coming, but Marcus Chen had not built his empire by doing things halfway. This investigation was just beginning. Within hours of leaving the deli, Marcus had set a complex investigation into motion. From the presidential suite of the Four Seasons Hotel, where he had arranged for Tommy to stay under the care of his most trusted assistant, Sarah, he began making calls that would shake San Francisco's food industry to its core. The first call was to James Wam, his head of security and a former FBI agent. I need everything you can find on the Golden Crumb and its owner, Marcus explained, pacing the hotel's luxurious meeting room. Every health inspection report, every supplier, every employee for the past 5 years. And I want surveillance on that midnight delivery van Tommy mentioned. James and his team worked with remarkable efficiency. Within 48 hours, they had uncovered a network that went far beyond expired meat and mislabeled bread. The Golden Crumb was just the tip of the iceberg. Boss, you need to see this, James said, spreading documents across the mahogany conference table. The deli is connected to at least 6 other restaurants in the city. They're all part of a larger operation. They're not just selling bad food, they're using these businesses to launder money for a bigger criminal enterprise. Marcus studied the complex web of shell companies and suspicious transactions. The numbers were staggering. Millions of dollars flowing through these seemingly ordinary establishments, all hidden behind the facade of legitimate business. But what truly caught his attention were the employment records. Many of the workers at these establishments were undocumented immigrants or homeless individuals, people desperate enough to stay quiet about the illegal activities they witnessed. People like Tommy, who had nowhere else to go. "There's more," James continued, pulling up surveillance footage on his laptop. "Remember the late-night visitors Tommy mentioned? We identified some of them. Several are known members of a human trafficking ring. They're using these businesses as meeting points." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He thought of Tommy, sleeping safely upstairs for the first time in months, and all the others who weren't so fortunate. How deep does this go? "Deep enough that we need to be careful," James warned. "These people have connections in local government. That's probably why the health inspections never found anything. They're being tipped off." Over the next week, Marcus deployed every resource at his disposal. His tech company's best data analysts combed through financial records. Private investigators tracked delivery routes and photographed midnight meetings. Hidden cameras were installed in strategic locations around the Golden Crumb. The evidence they gathered was damning. Video footage showed workers changing dates on expired products. Financial records revealed suspicious cash deposits that coincided with late-night meetings. Employee testimonies, gathered carefully from those who had quit, painted a picture of systematic exploitation. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Tommy, now clean and properly fed, proved to have an extraordinary memory for details. He worked with a sketch artist to identify vehicles and individuals he'd seen during his time in the alley. His descriptions led to the identification of several key players in the criminal network. "You never forget the faces of people you have to hide from," Tommy had explained quietly when Marcus expressed amazement at his recall ability. 2 weeks into the investigation, Marcus called a meeting with his legal team. The conference room on the top floor of his company's headquarters offered a panoramic view of the city, but no one was admiring the scenery. The mood was serious as they discussed their next steps. "We have enough evidence to take this to the FBI," the head lawyer announced, closing a thick folder. "But we need to move carefully. These people will fight back when cornered." Marcus nodded, looking out at the city below. He thought about all the other Tommies out there, all the vulnerable people being exploited by those who thought they were untouchable. His mind was made up. "Prepare everything," he ordered. "But before we go to the FBI, I want to make sure we have an airtight case. No loopholes, no escape routes. When we move, we take down the entire network." As the meeting concluded, Marcus received a text from Sarah. Tommy had just finished his first session with a trauma counselor and was asking to see him. Looking at the stack of evidence on the table, Marcus felt a fierce sense of purpose. What had started as a simple warning about a sandwich had uncovered a criminal enterprise that preyed on the city's most vulnerable. The investigation wasn't just about bad food anymore. It was about justice, about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. And Marcus Chen, the billionaire who had once walked past suffering without a second glance, was now fully committed to seeing it through. While the investigation continued to unfold, Marcus made a point of spending time with Tommy each evening. Today, they sat in the hotel's private garden, sharing pizza and watching the sunset. It was during these quiet moments that Tommy's full story gradually emerged. "Mom was a nurse," Tommy said, picking at his slice of pepperoni pizza. "She worked double shifts at 2 different hospitals. Said she was saving up to send me to college someday." His voice carried a mixture of pride and sadness that made Marcus's heart ache. The boy's life had been normal once. They'd lived in a small but comfortable apartment in the Mission District. Tommy had been a straight-A student, captain of his school's chess club. His mother, Maria Rivera, had managed to balance work and single parenthood with remarkable grace. "Everything changed last Christmas," Tommy continued, his eyes fixed on the setting sun. "Mom started getting these really bad headaches. She'd come home from work and just lie in the dark for hours. But she kept working. We needed the money." Marcus listened as Tommy described how quickly things had fallen apart. The diagnosis came in January, a brain tumor. Operable, but expensive. Their insurance covered only a fraction of the costs. Mom tried to hide how bad things were getting. She'd skip meals, saying she wasn't hungry. But I knew she was just making sure I had enough to eat. Tommy's voice cracked slightly. Then one day, she collapsed at work. They admitted her right there at the hospital. The medical bills had mounted quickly. Their savings vanished. Then went the emergency credit cards. By March, they couldn't make rent. The eviction notice came shortly after. The social worker at the hospital wanted to put me in foster care, Tommy explained, his hands clenching into fists. But I'd heard stories about foster homes from kids at school, and Mom needed me. I promised her I'd be okay, that I'd figure something out. He tried staying with friends at first, rotating between different houses so as not to burden any one family too long. But eventually, the options ran out. The streets became his only choice. The alley behind the deli was dry, and the kitchen vent kept it warm, Tommy said, echoing his earlier explanation. I'd visit Mom whenever I could sneak into the hospital. Told her I was staying with my friend Danny's family. I think she knew I was lying, but she was too sick to argue. Marcus watched as Tommy absently folded his paper napkin into smaller and smaller squares. The boy had survived 3 months on the streets, managing to stay clean enough not to draw attention at school, clever enough to avoid the dangers that lurked in the city's shadows, and brave enough to keep visiting his mother despite the risk of being caught. The nurses were nice, Tommy continued. They'd sometimes leave sandwiches or juice boxes where I could find them, but they were getting suspicious. Last week, one of them almost caught me sleeping in the waiting room. I knew it was just a matter of time before someone called child services. The story helped explain something that had been puzzling Marcus, why a 12-year-old boy would take such risks to expose the deli's wrongdoings. Living on the streets had taught Tommy the value of looking out for others, of standing up against wrongdoing even when no one else would. Your mother's surgery is scheduled for next week, Marcus said gently. They'd already arranged for Maria to be transferred to the best private hospital in the city. The doctors are very optimistic. Tommy nodded, but his expression remained troubled. What if something goes wrong? What if she doesn't? He couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus moved closer, placing a hand on Tommy's shoulder. Your mother is going to have the best medical team in California, and you'll be right there with her, in a proper room, not hiding in waiting rooms or sneaking through corridors. Tears finally spilled from Tommy's eyes, tears he'd been holding back for months. I just want her to be okay, he whispered. I want us to go home. Marcus pulled the boy into a hug, feeling his small frame shake with suppressed sobs. You will, he promised. You both will. But home might look a little different from now on. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the garden, Marcus made a silent vow. Tommy's story wouldn't end in tragedy. The boy who had shown such extraordinary courage in helping others would find that sometimes help comes back around in unexpected ways. The morning the FBI raided the Golden Crumb and 6 other connected establishments across San Francisco, Marcus watched from his office window high above the city. Multiple black SUVs surrounded the deli, and agents in tactical gear moved with practiced precision. Mr. Patterson was led out in handcuffs, his face ashen as news cameras captured his downfall. But this was just the beginning of Marcus's plan. While the criminal investigation would handle the illegal activities, he had spent the past week setting up something much bigger, something that would address the root causes that had led to Tommy's situation. The paperwork is ready, sir, his lawyer announced, placing a thick folder on his desk. The Chen Family Foundation has been officially registered. Initial funding of $50 million has been transferred. Marcus nodded, signing the documents without hesitation. The foundation would focus on helping families facing medical crises, ensuring no other child would have to choose between their education and their parents' care. But there was more work to be done. What about the property acquisitions? Marcus asked, turning to his real estate team. We've secured 3 buildings in the Mission District, his head of real estate responded, pulling up blueprints on the large screen. Renovation plans are ready. The first building can be converted into transitional housing within 3 months. The buildings would provide safe, temporary homes for families in crisis. Each unit would be fully furnished, with on-site social workers and medical coordinators to help residents navigate healthcare and social services. It wasn't just about providing shelter. It was about creating a support system. Meanwhile, across town at the private hospital, Tommy sat beside his mother's bed. Maria Rivera was recovering well from her surgery, her prognosis excellent. The room was filled with flowers and get-well cards from hospital staff who had come to know and love the brave nurse and her remarkable son. Marcus visited them that afternoon, bringing news that made Maria cry with relief. Not only had her medical bills been taken care of, but she had been offered a position as the head of patient advocacy at one of his company's new healthcare initiatives, a role that would allow her to help other families facing similar struggles. "But there's something else we need to discuss," Marcus said, pulling up a chair. He explained about the criminal network they had uncovered, how Tommy's courage had helped expose not just food safety violations, but human trafficking and money laundering operations. "Your son's actions have helped save many lives," Marcus told Maria. "But more importantly, he showed me something I had forgotten, that true wealth isn't about money in the bank. It's about what we do for others." The next day, Marcus called an emergency board meeting at his company. The presentation he gave shocked his executives. He was restructuring the company's charitable giving program, committing 20% of annual profits to social causes. The Chen Family Foundation would be just the start. "Our success brings responsibility," he told the stunned board members. "We had the resources to create real change. And thanks to a brave 12-year-old boy, we now have the blueprint for how to do it." The plan was comprehensive. Beyond the transitional housing and medical support programs, there would be educational initiatives, job training programs, and partnerships with local organizations already working in the community. Every aspect was designed to create sustainable, long-term solutions. By evening, as Marcus returned to his office, the news of the Golden Crumb raid had been replaced by stories about the new foundation. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from other business leaders, some criticizing his radical approach, others asking how they could help. Looking out at the city lights, Marcus remembered something Tommy had said during their first conversation. "They think because I'm just a homeless kid, I don't matter." The boy couldn't have been more wrong. His actions had set in motion changes that would help thousands of families. A text message lit up his phone, a photo from Tommy. It showed him and his mother in the hospital garden, both smiling, both safe. Below it was a simple message: "Thank you for listening." Marcus smiled, remembering his own childhood, his own struggles. Sometimes it took a child's courage to remind adults of what really mattered. The raid today wasn't just about bringing criminals to justice. It was about creating a city where no child would have to sleep in an alley to stay close to their sick parent. The coming months would be busy, but for the first time in years, Marcus felt truly energized. He had found a purpose bigger than profit margins and stock prices, and it all started because a homeless boy cared enough to warn a stranger about a sandwich. 6 months after the raid on the Golden Crumb, Marcus stood before a crowd gathered for the opening of the first Chen Family Crisis Center. The renovated building gleamed in the morning sun, its modern facade a stark contrast to its humble Mission District surroundings. But it was what lay inside that truly mattered. Tommy and his mother Maria, now fully recovered, stood beside Marcus as he cut the ceremonial ribbon. They had been instrumental in designing the center's programs, drawing from their own experiences to ensure it would truly serve families in crisis. "This isn't just a building," Marcus told the assembled crowd, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "This is a promise that no family in our city will have to choose between medical care and keeping their home. A promise that no child will have to sleep in an alley to stay close to their sick parent." The center was revolutionary in its approach. The first floor housed a state-of-the-art medical clinic, staffed by volunteer doctors and nurses, including Maria, who had become the program's lead patient advocate. The upper floors contained temporary housing units, each designed to feel like a real home, not an institution. But perhaps most innovative was the education center, which Tommy had helped design. It ensured that children of families in crisis wouldn't fall behind in their studies. Tommy, drawing from his own experience, had insisted on including a special program for kids helping to care for sick parents. "Kids need to know they're not alone," Tommy had explained during the planning meetings. "Sometimes just having someone who understands makes all the difference." The impact of the center was immediate. Within its first month, it had helped 20 families avoid homelessness while dealing with medical emergencies. The success stories spread quickly, and soon other cities were reaching out, asking to replicate the model. Marcus's tech company had changed too. The boardroom that once only discussed profit margins and market share now regularly reviewed social impact reports. The company had become a leader in corporate responsibility, with other tech giants scrambling to follow their example. One afternoon, as Marcus walked through the center, he overheard a conversation that made him pause. A young girl, probably around Tommy's age, was telling her story to a social worker. Her father had cancer, and they had been on the verge of losing everything. But then we found this place, she said, hope clear in her voice. Now Dad can focus on getting better, and I can keep going to school. Marcus thought back to that day in the deli, when a desperate boy had shouted a warning about a sandwich. How strange that such a small moment had led to such profound change. The Chen Family Foundation now operated 3 centers across San Francisco, with plans for more in other cities. Maria had become a powerful advocate for healthcare reform, testifying before state legislators about the need for better support systems for families facing medical crises. Her personal story, combined with data from the center's success, was helping change policies at the state level. Tommy, now back in school and thriving, had started a peer support group for kids with sick parents. Every Wednesday afternoon, they met in the center's community room, sharing stories and strategies for coping. The group had become so successful that other schools were starting similar programs. You know what the best part is? Tommy had asked Marcus one day, as they watched new families moving into the center. Nobody here has to pretend they're okay when they're not. They can just focus on getting better. The foundation's work had attracted attention from other wealthy individuals and corporations. Donations poured in, allowing for expansion of services and the planning of new centers. What had started as one man's response to a child's courage had grown into a movement. Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Another city wanted to discuss opening a crisis center. As he read the message, he smiled, remembering the billionaire he had been just 6 months ago, so focused on his next deal that he almost missed the chance to make a real difference. The sun was setting over San Francisco as Marcus left the center that evening. Through the windows, you could see families gathering in the community dining room, children doing homework in the study area, and medical staff providing care with dignity and respect. This was what real success looked like. In his pocket was a drawing Tommy had given him earlier that day, a simple sketch of the center with the words, "Thank you for helping us help others," written across the top. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest achievements come not from careful planning, but from having the courage to listen when life sends an unexpected message. 2 years had passed since that fateful day at the Golden Crumb. On a bright spring morning, Marcus sat in the main conference room of the Chen Family Foundation's headquarters, watching Tommy deliver a presentation to a group of business leaders from across the country. At 14, Tommy had grown taller, his once haunted eyes now bright with confidence. He moved through his slides with practiced ease, explaining how the Foundation's youth outreach program had helped over 1,000 children in the past year alone. When I was homeless, the hardest part wasn't being hungry or cold, Tommy told the attentive audience. It was feeling invisible, like my voice didn't matter. Today, we make sure every child knows they matter. Maria sat in the front row, beaming with pride. As the Foundation's Director of Family Services, she had built a network of support that stretched across multiple cities. Her own experience had made her uniquely qualified to understand what families in crisis needed most. After the presentation, Marcus watched as business leaders crowded around Tommy and Maria, eager to bring similar programs to their own cities. The Foundation's model had proven so successful that it was being studied by universities and governments worldwide. "Remember when you thought nobody would believe a homeless kid?" Marcus asked Tommy later, as they shared lunch in what had become their traditional spot, the Foundation's rooftop garden. Tommy laughed, adjusting the tie he now wore with ease. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed. Yesterday, I helped a boy who was in the same situation I was in. When he realized I'd been there too, his whole face changed, like suddenly he could see a way forward." The Foundation had grown beyond anything Marcus had initially imagined. What started as one crisis center had expanded into a nationwide network of support facilities. The original Mission District Center had become a blueprint for dozens of others, each adapted to meet local needs while maintaining the core mission. Maria's healthcare advocacy had led to significant policy changes. Several states had adopted new laws protecting families facing medical crises, inspired by the Foundation's success stories. She had become a respected voice in healthcare reform, regularly consulting with policymakers. But perhaps the most significant change was in Marcus himself. The billionaire who once measured success in stock prices and market share now found his greatest joy in the Foundation's impact reports. Each story of a family helped, each child kept in school during a crisis, meant more than any business deal. "You know what's funny?" Tommy said, looking out over the city. "That sandwich you almost ate, it actually changed hundreds of lives. Not because it was bad, but because you listened when I warned you about it. Marcus nodded, remembering that moment. Sometimes the best decisions aren't made in boardrooms. They're made when we stop long enough to hear someone else's story. Later that afternoon, they visited the original crisis center for its monthly community dinner. The dining room was filled with families, some current residents, some former ones who came back to support newcomers. Children played in the supervised activity area while parents shared experiences and resources. A new family had arrived that morning, a single father with 2 young daughters, recently diagnosed with leukemia. Marcus watched as Tommy and Maria approached them, saw the relief in the father's eyes as Maria explained the support systems available to them, saw the girls smile for the first time as Tommy showed them the children's program. This is what wealth is really for, Marcus thought, watching the scene unfold. His phone buzzed with messages about business matters, but they could wait. Here, in this moment, he was witnessing real returns on investment, measured not in dollars, but in lives transformed. As the evening drew to a close, Tommy gathered the children for their weekly story time. Marcus listened as the boy who had once lived in an alley read to a group of kids who now had hope for their futures. The story was about courage, about speaking up even when no one might listen, about how one small action could change everything. Looking around the room at all the lives touched by that single moment 2 years ago, Marcus realized that his greatest achievement wasn't building a tech empire or amassing billions. It was learning to see wealth as a tool for change, and success as something measured in human terms. The sun set over San Francisco, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Inside the center, families found hope, children felt safe, and a once homeless boy continued to prove that every voice matters, especially those that speak up to help others.